Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Gullible Pants and Overbooked. One of these is one of the show's most forgettable episodes for me, and the other is also probably a forgettable episode, but I happen to remember it very well, so I never think of it that way. I wonder if y'all can guess which one is which, because I bet it's a toss-up. As always, before I get started today, I gotta say thank y'all for tuning into today's video. I love interacting with y'all down in the comments, and I love that y'all keep tuning in week after week. And now, let's just get right into it. Alright, let's get rid of that suspense. Gullible Pants is the episode that I'd consider one of the show's most forgettable. Like, what is the plot again? That's a rhetorical question. I kind of remember. Or, I kind of remembered before revisiting this episode for this review. I usually think of Funny Pants or Squiditis when I think of this episode, or in fact, I think of those episodes before I think of this episode because I always get them mixed up. And I also never see anyone talk about this episode, a staple for my opinions as to whether an episode is forgettable or not. Though, surprisingly, this episode has 4 pages of discussion on SpongeBob Mania, which is higher than average, so maybe it is talked about. I just never hear it. And I can say that my opinions on this episode are rather unpopular just looking at these forum posts as well. So, our setup for the episode is that Mr. Krabs breaks his nail while he's counting money, which is a very Mr. Krabs thing to do. This setup is generally fine, but I'm not a fan of how the first few minutes of Gullible Pants is spent on Mr. Krabs trying to hide the fact that he's getting a manicure, since that would emasculate him, if anyone knew. My eyes are already rolling. Do I even need to say it? Something something male fragility, something something homophobia and transphobia, something something misogyny. And also, the humor is unpleasant. At least Mr. Krabs trying to sneak out is interesting, I suppose. With SpongeBob being left in charge of the Krusty Krab after Mr. Krabs leaves, this episode feels a bit like Squid's Day Off mixed with Hall Monitor to me, as SpongeBob immediately uses his power to try and put Squidward to work. Oh, and I gotta say, I liked the return of the track Maui Beach in this part of the episode. That was cool. We haven't seen that track since season 2 in Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3. It's been a long time. Anyway, Squidward during this part of the episode is very much a mood, although personally I'd never sleep at work because I do not sleep in public if I can help it. Squidward tricking SpongeBob is great as well because you just know he'll definitely get his by the end of the episode. So now we just gotta sit in anticipation for both how far Squidward will go and how exactly universal justice will be brought down upon him. Squidward's antics vary in how entertaining they are. Like, I love the part where SpongeBob just makes this random customer the fry cook. However, the part where Squidward tricks SpongeBob into serving Krabby Patties with his feet elicits far too much of a visceral reaction from me to be funny. SpongeBob making the Krusty Krab a dump is also pretty entertaining, and while it is nasty, it doesn't gross me out the same way that SpongeBob serving the food with his feet does. And then when SpongeBob starts dancing, I love how horrified everyone is by it. That was pretty funny. Once Mr. Krabs returns, the episode continues to be pretty funny and amusing. I love how Mr. Krabs lists everything wrong with what he's seeing. Like, the thoroughness is funny to me, and his increasingly dramatic reaction is great. I like that Mr. Krabs ends up just listening to SpongeBob because he fears that his secret is out. God, I wish that the base of that joke wasn't the all kinds of phobic shit that it is. But whatever. Moving on. The ending of Gullible Pants is great too. Squidward actually kind of fully wins for once, which is surprising. Mr. Krabs breaks his nail again, which is unsurprising, and then I love how SpongeBob just continues to creep out the customers by his dancing. One thing I like about Gullible Pants is that it leans into the kind of expressiveness that we haven't seen in a while. Like, the animation of this episode feels very still, but there are moments of real expressiveness, such as when Squidward first starts to trick SpongeBob, so that was nice. I didn't realize how much I'd been missing this kind of expressiveness until now, and I bet that's exactly why so many of the episodes in this season feel dull and empty, because there's very little expressiveness happening. So that's interesting to know. I should write that down somewhere. Gullible Pants actually surprised me by not giving Squidward any comeuppance, and I'm cool with that, mostly because I know that he'd eventually get an earful from Mr. Krabs, at the very least. So, to sum up this episode, I gotta say that I really enjoyed it. It's a very funny episode, another definite hidden gem, which is a shame. Season 6 has got a lot of those, you might have noticed. I really love how expressive this episode is too, like I said a little bit ago. It feels like we're leaving some kind of rut that we've been stuck in. And all of this together is why I'm placing this episode high up in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.8 out of 10. For today's second review, we've got Overbooked. So, if Gullible Pants was the forgettable episode in this episode pair, then this must be the episode that is also most likely forgettable, but I just happen to remember it well. And it's true. That's exactly what this episode is. I'm not entirely sure why I always remembered this episode well. Like, there was never a point where I had strong feelings about it. Well, that's kind of true. I guess it does make use of a trope, in a way at least, that I feel strongly about, so maybe that's why? Who knows? Let me stop stalling and jump right into the episode. How about that? So, one thing that I immediately like about Overbooked is that it utilizes many characters, including my girl Sandy, so that's an automatic win right there. In this beginning part of the episode, the setup portion is great. I really like the phone call with Sandy, especially once she gives that deadpan look to the camera, and then I loved the visual gag of her climbing into SpongeBob's side of the screen. SpongeBob promises to help Sandy out, but of course it can't be that easy for him because soon enough Mr. Krabs wants some of that help too. With Mr. Krabs, I love how he just uses, or rather abuses, his power as SpongeBob's boss to essentially force SpongeBob into building this telescope for him. And by this point in the episode, if the title didn't make it clear enough already, it's pretty easy to see exactly what this plot is about to be. SpongeBob is going to overcommit himself to everybody. Pretty similar to the abrasive side, now that I think about it. I bet I'll say something like this when I get to reviewing that episode. Anyway, of course, SpongeBob being torn between two commitments isn't quite enough for this episode, so now we add a third in Patrick, because it's his birthday and SpongeBob needs to be around for that. I'm choosing to believe that Patrick forgot his own birthday because it's not in character for SpongeBob to forget. And also, isn't Sandy Patrick's friend too? Why wouldn't she go to whatever birthday celebration that he has planned? It's funnier and better for me to think of it this way, otherwise I'd be annoyed by these specific character inconsistencies. However, even thinking of it this way doesn't really make Patrick's passive aggressiveness any easier to swallow. And while I'm here, I gotta say that this has got to be up there in my top 5 worst trends of this general era of the show. Cannot stand his passive aggressiveness. Overbooked, as you might expect, follows SpongeBob as he jumps around between these 3 commitments that he's made to his friends, and it gets harder and harder for him to keep up. It's almost like there's 3 mini-plots going on, but I can't really cover each mini-plot because that's not how they're structured, so yeah, I guess I'll just speak generally. So, SpongeBob's solution of just stopping by each event during key moments is entertaining to watch, and I like how this episode builds tension and anxiety with the music and the amount of time SpongeBob spends at each event, and the way that SpongeBob keeps bringing items from other engagements when he switches. Honestly, the only person with any kind of quote-unquote claim over SpongeBob's time, in my opinion, is Sandy, because she's the only one who actually asked SpongeBob if he could help and didn't force him into it, and she is also the only one that SpongeBob actually said yes to. But of course, I use claim very facetiously here. No one has a claim to SpongeBob's time. He's his own man. Although I do like how this episode builds tension and anxiety, how it puts us on the edge of our seats in anticipation for everything blowing up in SpongeBob's face, because I can appreciate a plot being executed well, I gotta say that these aren't exactly feelings that I like to have when watching this show in particular. Like, listen, Overbooked engenders these feelings well, but I don't want to be anxious when watching SpongeBob SquarePants, you know? And this is what I meant when I said that this episode uses, or kinda uses, a trope that I'm not a huge fan of because it almost teeters on the edge of secondhand embarrassment for me and misunderstandings and all that too. Those are hard for me to tolerate. And yeah, this is exactly what the episode is going for, and that's tough because while I can appreciate the effectiveness of the execution, I still don't like what the episode is going for. Eventually, everything does indeed come crashing down once everyone starts chasing after SpongeBob as he continues to go place to place, and then they all start fighting about who he's supposed to be helping. The way that they all turn on SpongeBob is unpleasant, especially Patrick and Mr. Krabs, since they didn't even give SpongeBob a chance to say no to them, but it's fine, I can take it. At least this bit of the episode ends very quickly, and SpongeBob ends up shouting anyway, so that's cathartic. Though, again, it is pretty laughable that Mr. Krabs and Patrick are like, you should have said something. Like, if y'all don't get out of here, he tried to say something. Okay, I'm probably sounding really annoyed right now. I'm not as annoyed as I sound, I promise. The ending of this episode is nice as well, with SpongeBob finally getting some well-deserved rest because of Sandy's cloning machine. I think that Overbooked is a good episode, maybe even a little more than that. It's certainly an enjoyable one, being amusing throughout its runtime, and again, I really like how it's written, even if its end goal is not one that I want for my personal brand of entertainment. I also wasn't a fan of SpongeBob being naked for a large part of the episode. Y'all know by now that's just a random thing I don't like. For some reason, though, this bothered me less here than it did in All That Glitters, the poster child for episodes where SpongeBob is naked for too long and for no reason. Not really sure why that is. Maybe because the episode is interesting enough for me to overlook it. Who knows? What matters is that this quality doesn't stop the episode from being placed in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.2 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. Man, season 6 is on an upswing. That's what, 3 great tier episodes in a row now? Pretty good. And like most of the good episodes in season 6, they're all hidden gems, since season 6 is pretty well known as one of the worst, if not the worst season of the show. But that's a conversation I'll have in much more detail once I finally get to that big season 6 review. I'm trying to think of what else I can talk about regarding these 2 episodes. I mean, I definitely cannot overstate how happy I am that Overbooked used Sandy and didn't substitute her for Squidward, because y'all, I am tired of Sandy getting left out. She's one of the big 5 and should be treated as such. Damn you, misogyny. One of these days I will go on that big rant about misogyny in this show, but like always, that day is not today, and maybe it'll never come, but I'd like to think that one day it finally will. Alright, well now I'm just talking about random bullshit. That's usually a sign that it's time to wrap things up, so I'll go ahead and leave y'all here, and I'll see you all in the next review.